Good morning, everyone. Good morning. What a great turnout this is for the Whitney Biennial. If anyone would like a seat, there are plenty of seats up front, in the middle. Don't be shy. Come on. Because I will be speaking for the next hour and a half, you might feel more comfortable being seated. We have a 5-hour Tristan and Isolde coming at the Met next week, the opera, so this will be easy. Welcome, everyone. This is a really great occasion. I was thinking on my way over here that I have seen every Whitney Biennial since 1997 when I was a college student, and I somehow convinced the school newspaper to let me review this exhibition, even though I wasn't in New York. And so a press preview, as a former member of the press, is always a very special occasion for me. And I actually haven't been to a Whitney Biennial press preview since 2019 because the last two coincided exactly with the birth of my children. So I'm done with that. I'm here with you, and I'm delighted to celebrate this exhibition, which is really a show that is at the heart of the Whitney. Everything we do at the Whitney in some way or another traces back to the Biennial, which traces back nearly 100 years to our founding. We were a museum founded by an artist for artists. We grew out of a studio club, and the closeness that we feel to artists, to their vision, to their voices, is something that I feel comes to the fore always the strongest during our biennials. So many artists who have been in biennials enter our collection, remain a part of our family, and it's a place where we test new ideas, where we learn about art, about contemporary life, about ourselves as an institution. And so this is a really important event every 2 years, and I'm really thrilled with this show. I want to start by thanking our sponsors, especially our presenting partner, Hyundai Motor. We are joined today by some of our friends from Seoul, and they have made possible the incredible Hyundai Terrace commission by Kelly Akashi. So I hope you all, despite the weather, will go out on the terrace on the 5th floor. It is so beautiful, so moving. We're incredibly grateful to partners like Hyundai that allow artists to dream big and actually realize those dreams. I also want to thank Fondazione Bulgari, the James Howell Foundation, the Keith Haring Foundation, the Trellis Art Fund, and the entire board of trustees of the Whitney Museum, who have been so supportive throughout this process as they are throughout all our years. I want to now take 1 minute just to introduce our biennial curatorial team. I'm going to recognize them all. Hold your applause at once. Co-curators, Marcela Guerrero, the DeMartini Family Curator, Drew Sawyer, the Sondra Gilman Curator of Photography, Beatriz Cifuentes, the Biennial Curatorial Assistant, and Karina Martinez, the Rubio Butterfield Family Fellow. Now we're going to applaud them. I am enormously grateful and honored to work with a talented staff of more than 400 people, all of whom contribute to the success of a show like this. But these 4 people have really given, most of the last year and a half of their lives to one another, to the artists in the show, and to our museum. And they will soon do that for our audiences. This will be the most free Whitney Biennial in our history. The Whitney, as many of you know, is now free every Friday night from 5 to 10 p.m. for everyone, the second Sunday of every month, all day long, including March 8th, come this Sunday, when we will celebrate the opening of the biennial, the closing of Calder in partnership with CMOM, the Children's Museum of Manhattan. And we are now free for the past year to everyone 25 and under, all the time, wherever you're from, whatever you want to see. We have welcomed more than 670,000 free visitors to the Whitney over the past 2 years. We've seen the size of our audience grow. It's become younger. It's become more diverse. And to think about this new audience for the Whitney, for art, meeting this show, which is so full of younger artists and new ideas, to me is really exciting in terms of the potential that this exhibition has to inspire, to challenge, to shape culture and people's lives. So Marcela and Drew will soon be joined by Kim Conaty, our Nancy and Steve Crown Family Chief Curator, to talk about the show. Kim, this is her first biennial as Chief Curator, and she's done an enormous and important and wonderful job working with the 2 curators. And Marcela and Drew, I want to thank you. You have brought so much of yourselves, your minds, your heart your time, your energy, your perspective, your wisdom, all these things to this show, and we feel it upstairs. This is a show that, for me, has a tremendous conceptual stringency, a kind of clarity about art and contemporary life, as well as a sense of humor, a sense of surprise, possibility, curiosity even. And I love the way all these ideas come together in this exhibition. So please spend time on the 5th and 6th floors. Go out on the terrace. Don't miss the installation in our lobby gallery right behind us, the billboard across the street. The Biennial has a way of seeping out across the museum. The stairwell, with an incredible commission by Margaret Honda. I want to draw your attention to all the places where the Biennial lives. And with that, I have no more notes, and I'm delighted to welcome to the stage Kim, Marcela, and Drew to introduce this exhibition. Thank you.
Okay, are we all on?
I think so, yes.
Yes. Excellent. First of all, thank you all so much for being here, braving the sleet, or I'm not actually sure what's happening outside right now, but we're here now. It's warm and cozy, and you have time with us down here, and then you'll have lots of time to explore the exhibition in the galleries just afterwards. So I first want to just say congratulations, and you are now nearing the end of this preparatory stage, getting to the point of opening. You've been working on this for about 18 months. I want to ask you actually when you think you're going to have a moment to rest, but maybe we'll hold on that for a second and talk about how you started.
How we started. So we started, I think we were announced sometime in early August, if I'm not mistaken. It was your birthday, August 6th.
August 6th.
Yes.
It was
we know
planned.
that, yeah. Leo Taurus here. And immediately we planned a trip to Puerto Rico, and that was early August. We wanted to start our research trip in Puerto Rico because of my ties, and I think it was the right place to start, especially because from the get-go, I think Drew and I were interested in thinking about places outside of the kind of geopolitical borders of the United States and thinking a little bit more broadly, and I'm sure that we're going to get to that. But yeah, we started in Puerto Rico, and then we traveled for about 12, 13 months, dozens of cities. We were on the road twice a month, doing anywhere from 4 to 10 studio visits, and then totaling probably more than 300 studio visits in 1 year.
And do you start with, before you start traveling, do you talk about artists that are of interest to each of you, and did you think about wanting to work with artists you've worked with before or take a different tack?
Yeah, we had a long conversation about how we wanted to approach the research, and I think we both agreed we wanted to be really open. And so we did start with certain artists, like just talking about certain artists we were curious, we'd never done studio visits with. We basically compiled, kind of a dream list of all the artists we would love to do studio visits with. I think that was like totaling almost 500 artists. As Marcela said, in the end, I think we ended up doing both virtual and in-person visits with a little over 300 of those. But that kind of list allowed us, it was also organized by city. So from the beginning, that kind of August, we started planning out basically 12 months of travel that was based on major exhibitions opening, both solo exhibitions, large group shows around the country, around the world. And then it allowed us to see like how many artists are in that city that we want to visit, and we kind of tried to do it as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, we took advantage of going to a lot of cities that had biennials or triennials so that we could see a lot of art, think about also exhibition design, and then do studio visits. So as Drew said, trying to be very efficient, and also part of the process was also meeting with previous biennial curators, who some of them are in the audience today. I don't know what time of the day it is. And meeting with them and also thinking of, okay, who did you visit? And keeping track of all of that in a very nice Excel spreadsheet.
And to your question about artists we've worked with, I mean, I think we've both done a number of solo exhibitions and group shows with living artists, younger artists, and we went into it really wanting the opportunity to meet new artists. And that was tough because, of course, you make relationships with artists you've worked with, and you want to continue to do that, but we also wanted to kind of free ourselves of like the things we've done in the past and even kind of our own areas of expertise that we're kind of most associated with.
Very brave. You just mentioned the word relationships. And I was thinking about how you've talked about how this biennial, you didn't approach it with a particular theme in mind, but you have talked a lot about the idea kind of throughout of being in relation or relationality. Can you pick up on that thread a little bit and think about maybe even how visitors might experience that in the galleries?
Yeah, we didn't, early on when I remember probably our first conversation, first breakfast we had, we said, we don't want to go with a predetermined idea. We both have done group shows and we know what that process is like, and our group shows have very tight thesis, and that didn't feel the right approach and strategy for a massive show that comes together in less than 2 years. So we said, let's go do these studio visits with artists that we are so curious to learn about their practices and processes, and let's listen to them and let's see where they are, because the remit of the biennial, of course, is to kind of take the temperature of what's happening in American art. And so we went with a really open mind, and as we were having these conversations, a lot of through lines started to emerge, and I think the one that you will feel in both on both floors is this idea of relationality and how we relate at a more macro level, thinking about geopolitics, the infrastructures that impact our lives on a daily basis, and also at a more intimate level, how do we relate as humans with perhaps other species, with other beings, non-beings.
And with that, another piece that I think relates to this idea of being in relation is this notion of kinship. You have a couple of really incredible examples of that in the show, and I wanted to mention one pairing that you've brought together that I think has been really exciting for you as well, between the artist Andrea Fraser, the only artist in this exhibition who has been in a previous Whitney Biennial, and her mother, Carmen de Monteflores. Can you talk about how that came together?
Andrea, everyone knows Andrea Fraser, a very well-known artist, the only artist who has been in a previous biennial. We were also part of our process. We were thinking, we're not gonna, go and choose an artist who has been in a previous biennial. And then, you set rules and then you break them, of course. That whole thing started back in October 2024 with, we were already deep into this research, and Andrea, who I knew a little bit from my previous job at the Hammer Museum, and she sends me an email and telling me about her mother's art and with a PDF. And I was so surprised, and we knew that we were going to go to the Bay Area, so it was the right opportunity to meet Carmen. And I'll give so much credit to Drew, because as we were in the car for many hours, and we were talking, and I'll paraphrase, but you say, the most kind of truthful, genuine way of presenting this story is by having Carmen and Andrea in the show. Do you want to say something about? Did I paraphrase you correctly?
Yeah, it was. I think we thought, that we both agreed that the work was amazing, Carmen's work, but. I think part of what we felt we were tasked with was showing art that we felt had been presented in the last 2 years, or it had some kind of contribution to the conversation. And because Carmen's work really hasn't been shown, I was thinking, how do we contextualize this within the context of the biennial? And artists, there are non-living artists, there are deceased artists, but they've, kind of had presentations in the last 2 years. And it just felt both the recognition to Andrea, who was the one that tipped us off, but also it just ended up being such a more generative and beautiful story than I think either of us could have imagined.
And it happened that Andrea also had a body of work that was very, very recent, these beautiful sculptures of these wax babies, and that ties so much with Carmen, with her story, with the relationship between the two of them. And I would even dare to say that a third component of that presentation that you'll see on the 5th floor is the 2 interviews that they do to each other that's in the catalog that really goes deep into all the feelings that that transpire between these two incredible people, feelings of grief, of guilt, of value, of care. All of that is really kind of analyzed and spelled out in the catalog.
The show is also really intergenerational. So, we're talking in this case specifically about a mother and daughter, but can you also share a bit about the kind of the range of senior figures, younger artists? Carmen is one of the oldest artists in the show.
Right, and Augusto Machado, who is timeless, I think is how he is designated. And
No
of
birth
course,
year.
a figure associated with like queer performance scenes beginning in the 1960s here in New York, began kind of creating these shrines more recently, one of which we actually acquired last year. So one of the works was already in the collection, and I think as we had conversations about other work, and we paired Augusto's work, these kind of shrines for many downtown figures who have passed away from HIV/AIDS, but also other downtown figures, with Cooper Jacoby, who also makes these kind of shrines using AI. So it's a really, and Cooper being a younger artist. Anyway, so we love those kind of combinations.
Past into present. And
thinking about bringing it in kind of intergenerational voices in combination to each other.
And I think also our older artists, our artists whose works are being reframed very recently in the past couple of months or years. I'm thinking of Pat Olesko, who has a show right now at its Sculpture Center, or Maui Ishikawa, whose work is being analyzed and theorized, Joan Key, through books, or Kimo Wamechewai's. So it's about the reframing and the thinking that's happening around these artists who are not the most expected biennial artists necessarily.
Another idea that has come out, and I think you feel it in the installation, I feel it personally very much on the 6th floor, is around infrastructure and how that might be felt in architecture, in structures, but also in systems. Can you talk about how that idea kind of came about and how you want to kind of frame that within the show?
Yeah, I think it came through a lot of those 300 visits, and a lot of actually artists you'll see from Philadelphia in particular, which I think is interesting. Many of them, went to UPenn, and I don't know, and a lot of them
like
talked
Michelle
about
Lopez and
a lot
Emilio
of them,
Martinez-Pope.
Yes, and a lot of them talked about infrastructure in Philadelphia in particular. So there maybe is something very specific about that. But I think it also came out of just like what we were reading, and I think a lot of people right now are interested in thinking about infrastructure, and of course the failure and crumbling of infrastructure right now. And that ranged from somebody like Lauren Berlant, an affect theorist whose posthumous book on the inconvenience of other people has the first chapter really frames the entire project through this idea of infrastructure in a more like kind of affective way. To other people thinking about like economic infrastructure. Like one book I was really interested in was Quinn Slobodian's Cracked Up Capitalism that came out a couple years ago, and a number of artists were thinking about it. Actually, Joshua Citarella, who does Doom Scroll, which we'll have 2 iterations of Doom Scroll here at the Whitney, and one in a couple weeks and another one this summer, had him as a guest. So there were all these kind of connections to like people who were theorizing it, and a lot of the artists we were meeting with.
Thinking about that idea of infrastructure, thinking about the idea of the way you move through the spaces, can you talk about mood a little bit as well? I think that, as I said, I think you'll feel a different mood on the 6th floor than on the 5th floor. The 5th floor has a wide range of moods, wall color, et cetera. Can you talk a little about that, how you thought about the space of the museum?
Yeah, I think mood started to emerge as we were talking to artists and also the things that we were reading. And I think when it comes to mood, which is in other categories that could fit into mood, like cuteness or weird, it also relates to things that we were reading, like the perma-weird. And these are things that are perhaps not, they're kind of more minor feelings or things that are not highly theorized, but seep in, and they have a way of smuggling in different ideas or larger ideas that have to do with belonging or representation or consumption. And so in talking to artists, for example, they wanted some artists wanted color, a lot of color in their rooms, some very specific types of chartreuse. And also a lot of works that have sound. There's one work that has an olfactory element to it, so which is really nice to go into the fifth floor specifically and let your sentient being just take everything in, the colors, the visuals, the scents, the sounds. Yeah, which I think also happens even from coming to the museum and seeing the Taina Cruz's billboard. It has that certain mood of anxiety and unease, but also cuteness at the same time.
Yeah, and I think it seemed like a lot of artists were thinking about how one conveys feeling in their work, not just like visual information or say content, but really thinking about translating. And for example, Sung Tu is an artist who has a commission in the Grand Stairwell here, which is currently turned off. But it's a large 30-foot tall steel pipe used as a gas pipeline, and that contains a speaker with recordings from fracking sites in Pennsylvania and West Virginia. And I know Sung is thinking a lot about how to translate this kind of abstract idea thing into something that is felt. And it's true, when you're walking in that stairwell or even in other places in the building, you feel your body shaking, in part because of what the pipe reverberates through the space. And I think that is true for a lot of artists who are really interested in kind of affect and how to make somebody feel something rather than try to explain it to them.
Yeah. We were talking when you were installing about how we should do like a sound bath here with that in the lobby. Let's see. I wanted to also, acknowledge with every biennial, this project unfolds over the coming months. So there's what you see in the galleries right now, and there's still more to come, and there will be performance, and there are programs. Can you tell me about a couple of things that you are really excited about on the horizon?
Well, very soon, March 25th, we're going to have a presentation of Precious Okoyomon on the 8th floor. We had that space available for a larger presentation. And we were going to bring this presentation that we saw in Bregenz in Austria. And as soon as we saw it, Drew and I thought, okay, we need space to give the space for Precious to present these stuffed animals. And so that will happen on March 25th, so that's just around the corner.
And we have a lot of performance in this biennial, which is really exciting. And some of it takes place in the galleries and then others in other spaces. We have kind of a concentration in middle of May, the kind of weekend around Frieze. We'll have Maya Chow, who will present a new commission performance, and Jonathan Gonzalez as well, which is really exciting. And then we'll have another moment in July with Gabriela Ruiz, who will be doing a performance on Gansevoort Street. Niall Harris will be activating the gallery and a sculpture that he has 26 times throughout the biennial, which is really exciting. So I'm excited about the performance program in particular.
Definitely. One last question, which is a really big one. I realize as I'm staring at Glenn Ligon's Rückenfigure America here. You both thought about this question of America as this is not just any biennial. There are biennials and triennials all around the world now. But what does it mean specifically to have an exhibition like this within this frame And it would be interesting to hear you speak a little bit more about that, because you took a little bit of a different approach than previous biennials.
Yeah, I think if there was anything that we early on talked about was this idea that art about the U.S. is not the purview of American artists only, that we can think about American art through a more global lens, thinking about places where the U.S. has had histories of intervention, occupation, or thinking even in the work of Ignacio Gatica, where neoliberal policies and thinking migrated, it was exported to Chile. Examples like that.
Yeah, and I think, of course, we were thinking about the historical biennials, too, and how do you build on, I think each biennial tries to challenge the institution a little bit, or how we practice things internally, or even just previous ones. So, in 2022, Adrian Edwards and David Breslin really thought about borderlands, especially with Mexico and Canada. And 2024, thought about global indigeneity as an umbrella, and so it felt like an interesting way to kind of build on that legacy as well.
Before we move on, any one or two things that you hope visitors kind of carry with them as they explore the show today? Any kind of like must-see corners or anything like that? You should see all of it, by the way, but.
I don't know. I would say I just allow yourself for surprises. And as I said before, it's not just the visual, but make sure your other senses are also attuned to, what you'll see, feel, hear, smell.
I mean, I would just, as Scott mentioned, it's not just 5 and 6. Of course, there's Zach Blass in the lobby gallery right here. There's works outside, including David Johnson, a kind of intervention into our own building property, who has another work on 6, Raven Half Moon in the Largo, Sung Tu in the stairwell here, and then Margaret Honda in the stairwell on the west side. So, be sure to explore the entire building.
Definitely.
And the catalog. Explore the
catalog.
catalog.
And the catalog, right. You talked about that a little bit, but the catalog is also thinking about being in relation. You have brought together artists interviewing others, so that you tell me a little bit about that or share that, please.
Yes. So for the catalog, we decided that we wanted artists to be in conversations with their chosen interlocutor. And so I think we, different from other catalogs where perhaps there's a write-up, and we both have done some of those write-ups for previous catalogs of a 500, 1,000 word write-up on a single artist. We wanted to give artists the freedom to choose who they wanted to speak with, to have more intimate conversations with, different scholars, curators, other artists, people who they hadn't met before, or even their parents. And we wanted this to be kind of from the artist's voice, to have that type of primary source, but also have it be a snapshot of where artists are at this specific moment.
And yeah, as you said, it really kind of tied into this idea of relationality, or like kind of the networks of support of the larger art world, right? As Marcela said, so many artists chose other artists whose work they love. In some cases, they'd never even met. Like Isabel McGuire asked Charles Ray, and they had never met. Or Emily Gassiot asked Ocean Vuong, who they had never met either. But then there's family connections, and it just I think it kind of opened it up to this idea of kind of networks of support that make up the art world. Especially, so many of the artists, the reason we know them is because of other curatorial colleagues who have worked with them. And so many artists, unsurprisingly, chose curators they had worked with, which really gives voice to the people, the reason why we even know some of these artists are on our radar.
Yeah, it's great. Okay, I'm not going to keep you here any longer. You can explore the galleries. I wanted to share that we will open to the public this Sunday, March 8th, which also happens to be a free second Sunday. So this is a really momentous occasion for us at the Whitney, where our opening biennial day will invite, hopefully, many, many, many people in the doors. We're anxiously awaiting that. I'm looking at Larry. He's like, oh. And then we just might be having a soft opening for the biennial for our free Friday night. So there we have some exciting big biennial moments coming up this weekend. Thanks again for being here, and please enjoy the galleries.